if they got a record on this. Page 87. Go ahead, pick it up at Faith Survives the Dispersion. Faith Survives the Dispersion. Again, this is a history book that's showing you how proven the Bible is. Go ahead.
Faith Survives the Dispersion. The crucifixion of Jesus about AD 30 did not end Jewish resistance to the Roman occupation.
Okay, now notice. They said the crucifixion of Jesus about AD 30. See, the Bible didn't never tell you AD 30, but see, they know the time frame. They said, they guesstimate, they say about AD 30, which it was. Because he was about 33 years old, and all estimates point to him being born anywhere from around 4 BC. So, it said the crucifixion of Jesus about AD 30 did not end Jewish resistance to Roman occupation. Because the Romans was ruling at this time. The emperors ran everything. And of course, Israel didn't like that. But see, the Lord had put the Romans over Israel for disobedience. So they was rude. See, that's why they tried to trip Jesus up, because they knew Israel didn't like the Romans ruling. So they asked Jesus, do we pay tribute to Caesar? Because they're going to make him look bad with Israel, or they're going to make him go against Caesar. They can go run and tell Caesar. You know, he said, you ain't skipped you, Caesar. But see, they didn't know who they was dealing with. Jesus was wise. Jesus said, show me a coin, you hypocrites. So they showed him a coin. He said, well, whose picture is this? Who's this? They said, Caesar. He said, well, get a Caesar what belongs to. He said, look, I ain't got to pick either one. Both of them, you owe both of them something. But render to God what belonged to God. See, because Jesus, he understood the whole thing, of course. But now, we just saw where he said Jesus was prophesying before it took place. He said that Israel was going to be led away, going to fall by the edge of the sword in Luke 21:24, and be led away captive into all nations, right? Mm-hmm. That's what Jesus said. Now, he said it before it happened. It hadn't happened yet. Just like Moses said it before it happened. He was going to go back into Egypt on ships and be sold. But now, so the history books say the crucifixion of Jesus about AD 30 did not end Jewish resistance to Roman occupation. Go ahead.
In 70.
Now, 40 years later, from the time Jesus died, 40 years, in 70 AD, in 70, what happened?
When the country was again in a state of revolt, Jerusalem, the holy city, became the core of the resistance to the Romans.
See, now 40 years after Jesus died, the Romans was trying to take it over completely because Israel was still resisting, didn't want to do what they was telling them to do. See, eventually the city had to fall. Even though the Lord didn't let Sennacherib take it off way back then, eventually it's going to have to fall because everybody had to go off into captivity. Jesus said it. He said Israel was going to be led captive into all nations, and the Gentiles was going to run it, right? That's why whatever the Gentiles say to this day about Jerusalem, that's the way it is. Even the Arabs and the Edomites are not Gentiles. They Semitic, but they still got to come up to meet with the Gentiles to see what happened with Jerusalem. And if they really make the Gentiles mad enough, which is eventually what's going to happen, the Gentiles will say, both of y'all sit over there and we're going to run this. Because the Gentiles run it. So he said in 70, when the country was again in a state of revolt, Jerusalem, the holy city, became the core of resistance to the Romans. Go ahead.
Titus, the son of Emperor Vespasian, proceeded to lay siege to Jerusalem. The city fell, and the inhabitants were enslaved in their thousands and dispersed throughout the Mediterranean world.
Oh, you see that? Now, this is history telling you this. It said they was resisting the Romans and even telling you the people involved. The Bible don't give you the people. The Bible don't tell you about Vespasian and Titus, do it? These are true figures in history. Because Vespasian was the emperor. And his son Titus was the general. And Vespasian, well, first Vespasian was the general running the army. And he actually had Jerusalem, if you read a lot of more history, he had Jerusalem surrounded at first. But then something happened to the old emperor, so he said, look, I got to go. I'm trying to see if I can become emperor. So he ended up leaving the siege of Jerusalem, and he left his son Titus in control. That's why Titus is the one who ended up taking the city, because Vespasian went back and later became emperor. So, but all this is documented. Exactly what Jesus said 40 years prior history telling us it happened, isn't it? He said, read it again, this Titus.
Titus, the son of Emperor Vespasian, proceeded to lay siege to Jerusalem. The city fell, and the inhabitants were enslaved in their thousands.
And they got enslaved in their thousands, right? Got scattered out. Isn't that exactly what Jesus said? Jerusalem you're gonna be led away captive into all nations? Slavery and captive, same thing. Go ahead. And dispersed throughout the Mediterranean world, all along the coast. And then went farther than that later on, because Moses talked about ships. But now that's another example. Let's go further. Go to Genesis 16. We're going to go back now and pick some other stuff up. And this is just common sense stuff. All you got to do is look around what the Bible has told you long ago has came to pass or is still coming to pass. Can't get away from it. That's how you know the Bible is the undisputed word of God. That's why I ain't worried about no other book. If I find another book that coincides with the Bible, so be it. Maybe I know how to find out how to make some more tea or something. But as far as getting salvation, we got everything we need with what we got.
Praise the Lord.
Genesis 16 and verse 8. All the way back to Genesis 16 and verse 8, because this went on with Abraham and his first son, because he had a son before he had Isaac. 16 and 8. Go ahead.
And he said, Hagar, Sarai's maid, whence camest thou? And whither wilt thou go?
Go ahead.
And she said, I flee from the face of thy mistress Sarai. And the angel of the Lord said unto her, return to thy mistress and submit thyself under her hands.
Okay, so what happened here, Sarah was real generous. We read this on Wednesday night. Sisters don't really like to hear this because Sarah was real generous. She told Abraham, you know, since I can't have no babies here, I give you my maid for a wife, and you have a baby through her, which is what she did. So, but then, of course, Hagar got puffed up when she became Abraham's wife too, and she started looking at Sarah out the side of her eye. So Sarah started dealing with her because she still was the boss. So then Hagar ran off, and the angel got her and said, where you going? And so she said here, verse 8, she said, I flee from the face of my mistress Sarai. And verse 9, and the angel of the Lord said unto her, return to thy mistress and submit thyself under her hands. Verse 10.
And the angel of the Lord said unto her, I will multiply thy seed exceedingly, that it shall not be numbered for multitude.
See, he let her know she was about to give birth. Because the plan that Sarah had did work. She had a child for Abraham. But see, even Sarah didn't know that the Lord had a plan her child for Abraham. Go ahead.
And the angel of the Lord said unto her, behold, thou art with child, and shalt bear a son, and shall call his name Ishmael.
Shall call his name Ishmael. Go ahead.
Because the Lord hath heard thy affliction.
And that's what that means, because the Lord hath heard thy affliction. So she had a son. Now she was an Egyptian, and Abraham was a Hebrew. But the Lord was making nations at this time. So the child automatically is a Hebrew, but the Lord was still making different nations. So he made him a brand new nationality. And we know this is where the Arabs come from, Ishmael. They know that. And let's see what the Lord say about our brothers, the Arabs. This is their forefather, Ishmael. Go ahead.
And he will be a wild man.
Oh, he will be a wild man. Do you have to look hard to find that? That's proof in the pudding. We don't have to read no further. Even though the Gentiles run the world, and he know the Gentiles run the world, he don't care, do he? He will blow himself up to try to get to the Gentiles. This is him. He said he will be a wild man. Go ahead.
And every man's hand will be against him.
And
every man's hand against him.
Start at 12 again. Okay.
And he will be a wild man. His hand will be against every man, and every man's hand against him.
Boy, we know that's the truth, isn't it? He said he would be a wild man, and his hand would be against every man. He do not care. His hand will be against every man's hand will be against him. He do not care who it is. He will fight you. That's